This is question 8. Don says, the fact that the veil is raised higher on the right-hand side than on the left indicates to me that the adept choosing the positive polarity will have greater success in penetrating the veil. Woodrock comments, and before making that comment, I actually feel compelled to talk a little bit about the question 7. So let me do that. In question 7, they briefly talked about this, about the veil somewhat lifted, but still present. And this is because the work of the mind in third density, it's still ongoing. So it's not like the great way of mind signifies the lifting of the veil and some sort of graduation or something like that. It doesn't mean the culmination of a path, but rather a structure in which the mind now proceeds to continue to have experiences and, of course, aid in the polarization of the chosen path. So that's what it's representing. It's, I would say, like the gestalt of this, all these other cards. And I think that's what Ra mentions at some point. I forget if it's in the past or later on or even here. But it is an amalgamation of all of the other cards. And that's what it signifies, right? So we talked a little bit about that, and then we mentioned the veil, because there is a curtain, right? There's a veil or a curtain on top, and it seems to be lifted more on the positive side. And so Don says, well, the fact that the veil is raised higher on the right-hand side, which is the positive path, then on the left indicates to me that the adept choosing the positive polarity will have greater success in penetrating the veil. So is this true that the positive entity has more aid, more success, more capacity to lift the veil than the negative one? And this gets into an interesting conversation about what it is that happens, let's say, in terms of identity with the entity. So let's see what Ra says. Ra explains, this is a true statement if it is realized that the questionnaire speaks of potential success. Indeed, your third density experience is distorted or skewed so that the positive orientation has more aid than the so-called negative. So a couple of things here. Let's just get into the practical meaning of the veil and the progression in one of the two paths. Everything is one being. Let's forget about the veil. There is no veil. There is only awareness of completion and unity, wholeness, no separation. Separation only exists to experience reality, to experience a universe, to experience a creation, a manifestation. But the feeling of connection, right? Our minds are all connected, and so we can see true separation. We only see the veiling of our unity, so we can perceive each other as entities. Okay, that's conditions prevail. There is experience. Experience is not intense because we can see that we are all connected, and so no action is really important and no love is truly intense. But then the veil comes in, right, and it creates a higher, deeper illusion of separation. Now, because the veil is present, then my seeking or my desire for unity intensifies, because something inside me that I cannot understand is telling me that this can be real. You see, this doesn't come as an intellectual thought, although we can fashion it eventually, but deep inside I feel this, which we can define properly, and it's called love. So I have love, and love is transcending all separation, all differentiation between us and the universe and everything. There's just this feeling, this longing for connection, which we call love. So that's the positive path, see, is using this knowledge to enhance an understanding that is not easily conveyed in post-veiling conditions. That is the positive path. And that's why we have this whole archetypical structure to move towards this path. The more we use it, the more we see it. The more we see it, the more we live it. And the more we live it, then the more we want to see, and so on. So it potentiates itself once it is chosen and it is expanded. It is used as a way to inform our actions and behaviors and thoughts. So that's the positive path. The negative uses the veil, right? It's aware of the veil. However, it buys into the idea of separation. And so it starts to potentiate separation. And through separation, it obviously needs to create an image of itself, which it needs to strengthen and intensify in order to progress. So the progression here has to do with, well, what is the feeling of separation? The feeling of separation is control. So instead of love, which is something that comes natural, we need to devise this control to intensify the possibility to control things. First, you control yourself, and then you control others and situations and systems and so on. So thanks to the veil, we can either intensify our seeking and thus our service and our love, or we can intensify the feeling of separation for the image that is created through the veil to live, first believe and then live through the process of separation, right? So that's the scenario, and that's what we see in the Great Way. Whichever has been chosen and then desired for further potentiation, increase, intensification, and that's what the Great Way is going to represent. The Great Way of mind is constantly moving towards that direction, empowered by the chosen polarity and moving with the rest of the archetypes in that direction. Either creating the separate self and solidifying it, or dissolving the idea of the separate self for unity, for the sense of unity consciousness, as we call it. So Ra says that it is true that the positive path has more success because it has more aid, but as long as we see it as potential success, and it's not something, this is something that we discussed in the last question 7, where Ra said that this is not properly the work of third density to remove the veil, but rather to work through the veil. You see, I talked about this as a sort of porous structure of the veil, where the pores become wider and wider, and so we can see through more. Whereas the negative path uses the veil to validate the identity that it has created for itself and justify its actions towards the universe. First, it needs to validate its action for himself, and then towards others, and so forth through the universe, which is my view that in the model of the law of one, we see negative entities as trying to control the whole universe, which is a foolish attempt, because if you were to control the whole universe, then wouldn't you be the whole universe? But negative entities can't see that because they're still buying into the image of separation. It's only when they drop the image of separation where they can control the universe, but for that, you are already the governing force of the universe, which is what we worked from the beginning in the positive path. So it's a kind of foolish path in any case. But okay. They do say your third density experience is distorted or skewed so that the positive orientation has more aid than the so-called negative. Now, here's something that I see in this statement. Both positive and negative orientations have aid, okay, if they so desire, which of course they both want. The positive entity calls upon aid when it says, I don't know, I want to see. You see, and then this kind of surfaces to the mind. New thoughts in this direction start to be informed by this knowledge of unity. And so the more it asks for it, it is available there. The resources are available. And the resources, let's call this angels, ancestors, whatever you want to call it, all these resources are pushing towards, of course, bringing truth to the mind. And yeah, it's like aid in the same direction. Whereas on the negative, you can see that there is also aid, but there is selfish aid. So if we talk about in terms of entities, imagine a positive entity helping another positive entity. That one just wants liberation, right? The one that is helping wants the other one to be liberated so it can see for itself. That's the proper aid of positive entities. Whereas on the negative is trying to manipulate the lesser entity that is asking for help. And so that's how I see it, that even though they do get aid from other negative entities, those negative entities also want to use them. And so the benefit that they can get, it's not so much the direct aid that they get, but rather the lesson of how I was manipulated so I can now manipulate others. And so it's sort of like a pyramid scheme, if you think about it. So you basically learn from how you were manipulated to manipulate others, and hopefully even manipulate your master. Whereas, the positive path is about how to not depend anymore on your master, just to gain freedom. And the master's idea is for you to gain freedom from the beginning. So, we have all these stories in Zen where the teacher or the master simply says, I have nothing to teach you. You see, that's it. If you get that, you leave and you're done. You don't need your teacher. But you insist, so the master is going to give you some nonsense to do. Sit down and meditate. Think about who were you before your parents conceived you, and so on. All these koans. So yeah, this is the difference in terms of aid. That's what I see. So yeah, I would also say that the veil needs to be more present in the negative path, right? If I lift the veil, or if I see through the veil, then I'm going through the positive path, whereas I need more veil on the negative path to validate my own image and the image of the world being separate from me. Hope that makes sense.